Hello and welcome to a special live stream that we've decided to put up to help combat the boredom of the world. We're offering this as something that we can give back to past, present, and future customers, friends, family, and we hope you are here to join us and make. Christine, what are we making today?
Today we're going to be making anthotypes.
What's an anthotype?
An anthotype is a emulsion on a piece of paper that is made from plant materials, be it berries, spices, leaves, natural dyes of the walnuts and stuff like that.
Okay, well, how does it work? How do anthotypes work?
So anthotypes work, you coat a piece of paper, for example, and once you coat it, you put a leaf or something on it, and
well, hold on a second. Let me make sure I'm understanding you a little correctly. So is this a regular piece of paper?
It needs to be a piece of paper that can withstand being coated with whatever you're coating with. Watercolor paper works very well. Copy paper can be used for this. It's not going to be dipped in water like the cyanotype, which is another process we do.
Okay.
But it has to withstand the coating process.
We've got a piece of paper that can withstand coating it with plant juice, right? Plant or berry juice. And we're coating this with something that can give us some kind of a pigment, right?
Correct.
Now, how does this work? What happens that makes this a photographic process? Because to be honest with you, I'm not exactly sure.
What happens is you put it out in the sunlight, and once it's in the sun, the UV light rays from the sun fade whatever is not covered.
Okay.
So over time, you end up with an image.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Much like this, which might be a little difficult to see at home as this is a yellow one.
There we go, a little bit. So these are delicate processes. This is not something you're going to get what we call in the photographic world D-max, which you're going to have really dark darks and really light lights. You're going to have something that's kind of very delicate and very, very kind of light, really.
Depending on what you use. If you use something that's darker, say like this, you'll probably end up with a darker anthotype.
Okay.
But it may take longer to expose.
Now, what happens? What nasty chemicals are we putting on this piece of paper to make a photo out?
We are not using anything that is too dangerous.
So you're telling me this is safe for kids?
This is safe for kids. This is a very easy process that you can use at home with your kids. You want to make it so that the material is coatable, so you mix it with water or oils, which can get very messy, which I wouldn't recommend, or things like isopropyl alcohol or denatured alcohol or things like that.
Well, before we get too crazy in, let's talk a little bit about the process. When was this process invented?
So this process was invented by Sir John Herschel in 1842. If you've been to any of our other workshops, you may recognize that name. It is the exact same person who in the exact same year discovered the cyanotype. Okay.
What is this? Well, let's not get too far of ourselves. Obviously, anyone who's seen us out in the field or anyone who's been to one of our workshops has recognized us. If you don't recognize us, maybe it's because we're not in 4 layers of wool in a grassy field on a summer's day. This is normal clothing for us, so if you've seen us before, hi. But Christine teaches all of our kids' workshops and kids' classes, and she teaches lumen print, cyanotypes, anthotypes, and pinhole cameras and solography. And this process is something that is easy and safe for kids, but also can be challenging and beautiful for adults to work with as well, right?
Yes. It is very easy for adults to do, and kids should be supervised if they are doing this. So the parents need to be involved in helping them.
Okay, that's good. That's good to think about. Now, the teaser was we can do this with household chemicals that nearly everybody should have around their house. So can we talk about? Let's talk about what we need, because right away we know we need a piece of paper that can withstand coating. Once we coat it once, though, it doesn't need to be rinsed anymore typically. Now, we do have a couple thoughts on some different process, some more advanced stuff. But once you coat it once, that's it, right?
Correct.
Okay. So you have your paper, you've got your pigment, you've got a brush. What kind of brushes can we use?
You can use any brush that you have around, but I recommend, especially with kids, a foam brush.
Okay.
Another thing you can use is a hockey brush or a normal paintbrush or an art brush.
Okay. Perfect. So you've got these around your house. That's great. You found your paper. I've noticed that, as Christine had said, watercolor paper works good. Inkjet printer paper actually works pretty well as well because it's meant to hold on to that pigment and kind of keep it in the whatever the coating is. We've seen rice paper, we've seen copy paper, we've even seen clothing. It's a normal basic process that when you go out and you leave a piece of clothing out, and if it's not really color fast, then it will fade. And this is the exact same thing we're doing. It's nothing groundbreaking here, but Sir John Herschel was the gentleman that really kind of figured out, hey, fading, leaf, put them together, and now I've got a photo. Okay, we've got our paper, we've got our brush. What kind of pigments can we use?
You can use a lot of different things. Some of the things that I have used recently is coffee, but you want a very strong base. So what I did was make a very strong coffee out of instant coffee. Or you want a very strong tea. Tea also is dark and can be used. You can use turmeric, which is one of the ones that we're using. And that's what made this yellow one that you see here on the table. You can use food coloring or dyes. Being this time of year where Easter is fast approaching, a easy one that you can get is the Paws Easter egg dyes.
Okay.
So once you color your eggs, whatever you have left, you can coat on paper and make anthotypes with. You can use berries, strawberries, blackberries, raspberries. For those, you want to blend them up in a blender and then mix in some water or alcohol to help bleach out those colors.
Let's talk about the difference between water and alcohol. I know that you have problems with some pigments just because of the water. Now, but alcohol works fine. Is that just because the pigment is soluble in alcohol?
Correct.
Okay.
Not everything is soluble in water, so if it's like the turmeric has to be in alcohol because it will not, the dye, the yellow color will not go into water.
Excellent.
That's from the curcumin that's a part of it.
Perfect. So this curcumin and turmeric. You've got, did you say red cabbage?
I haven't said red cabbage yet.
Okay, this smells wonderful when she makes this red cabbage. It doesn't smell wonderful at all. But she will blend this up, and you use, I've seen you cut the red cabbage up, and you make sure to keep only the pieces that really have the red pigment in them.
Correct, because that's what you want.
And then I see you blend them up. Now, I've seen you use water and I've seen you use alcohol with the red cabbage. What works better, or why would you use alcohol over water maybe?
Alcohol will evaporate a little faster than water.
Okay.
So that might be one. It might also help you get the color in out of the leaves better.
Okay. But it also will probably be good that if you're not entirely sure if the pigment you're working with is soluble in water or alcohol, typically alcohol will do pretty much all of them, I think. Okay, so it's definitely it's definitely something to play around with. Now this is not red for red cabbage. Can you tell them what the secret characteristic of red cabbage is?
The advantage of red cabbage is you can turn this to almost any color you want it because red cabbage is a natural litmus paper. So if you want it to be, I forget which one's red and which one's blue, but
I don't know. I don't remember. I don't remember.
But if you use baking soda to make it more basic, it'll turn one color. Or if you use like lemon juice or an acid, like vinegar, it'll go to a different color. So this is just plain red cabbage, so that's where you get the purple from.
Mm-hmm.
But you can go blue or you can go red depending on how basic or acidic your emulsion is.
And that actually was used quite a bit, and that's actually one of the really cool, like, kind of science fair kind of things you can do with your kids is blend up some red cabbage and introduce it to basic or acidic solutions, and it's crazy. It's crazy how it changes around. So that's that. We talked about the red cabbage. We talked about the turmeric. Now, is this a process that I need to go out and get all kind of scales and I need to be precise with my measurements, or is this something I can kind of just experiment and have fun with?
Experiment and have fun with, absolutely. There are so many options out there. As I said, you have the berries, you can use flower petals, and if you only have a couple, a good thing to use is a mortar and pestle, and you can crush it up, and with only a couple petals, you can coat a piece of paper. And
the listeners are loving that.
Or you can use a blender if you have a lot of something, berry juices, large flowers, etc.
So this sounds like it would be also a great opportunity to get yourself out during the times. Of course, go out and be safe, but get yourself out, maybe hike a trail, collect some flowers, collect some berries, collect some pokeberries. Christine's been wanting to take me out to collect pokeberries, and these berries, when you collect them, I believe they're poisonous, so be careful what you're collecting. But you're supposed to put gloves on, and then when you bring them in, you bring all these nasty pokeberries in, and you can squeeze them to get that pigment out. And that's supposed to be a really, really good anthotype pigment as well.
Correct.
Excellent. What else? What else do people maybe have in their kitchens that they can? Let's say they don't have turmeric, or let's say they don't have red cabbage just sitting around.
Coffee, tea, cheap red wine.
How about fancy red wine? Now, we don't want to tell people to definitely, especially nowadays, you want to hoard this stuff. Maybe don't hoard this stuff, but cheap stuff. Christine has had this stuff around for so long, and she uses this to tone her cyanotypes as well. But this will put a pigment on the paper. Now, can you do multiple coats on the paper to make the pigment darker?
Absolutely, and sometimes you may need that, depending on how concentrated or how unconcentrated your emulsion is.
Excellent. Well, why don't we just go ahead and jump in, and why don't we talk a little bit about let's mix something. Let's mix some turmeric, and can we coat some paper and just kind of prove to people how easy this is?
Yeah.
Excellent. Do you want to use Le Fancy wine, or do you want to use turmeric, or why don't we do one of each? How about that? You do that, and while you do that, I'm going to pour you some of this this fine red wine.
So first, you want to start with some turmeric, which we found this really big one, and we use this with our cyanotypes too for wet cyanotypes. But so we have multiple purposes for our turmeric. And you want about 1 gram in 100 mLs of isopropyl alcohol, which is about 1/3. And this doesn't have to be exact. So take about does that look like about 1/3?
Yeah, sure. You can't mess this up. The only thing you have a problem with is maybe your pigment isn't as strong as it needs to be. And if that's the case, then just give it another coat. It's no big deal.
Oh, and be very careful with turmeric. It can stain your clothes, so you want to be a little careful of your clothes and your work surface. So if you have to put down some newspaper or make sure you're using a surface that you don't mind.
So I should protect my clothes as well?
Yeah.
Excellent.
Nice.
Okay, do you want this?
Sure.
That's my favorite apron anyway. Okay. We've got our clothes protected. Do we need to protect our work surface as well?
It depends on what surface you're using. If it's something easily wipe upable,
that's a word.
If you can easily wipe it up, then you're good. But
okay.
If you are using a surface that can stain easily, you may keep paper towels nearby or cover with some newspaper
or some plastic.
Or plastic.
Great. Excellent.
I know that this container is about 120 mLs, so I'll be able to estimate about where 100 is.
So 1 gram of turmeric and about 100 mils of alcohol. And again, we're using alcohol because that's what the curcumin, that's what the pigment needs to get taken out of the solution. And again, you don't need to. This does not need to be perfect.
What we're
Measurements don't need to be perfect.
And we're using 70% isopropyl alcohol. You can use 90% isopropyl. You could try some denatured alcohol. And this isn't an exact measurement thing. We know that for turmeric, it's about 1/3 of a teaspoon for 1 gram, but not every spice is going to be that way.
Let me shake this up for you.
Sure.
Put a lid on it and shake it. Or you can just stir it. Now, the interesting part about turmeric is once it pulls all that curcumin out, you're going to have a lot of, what do the kids call it nowadays? You're going to have a lot of precipitate on the bottom, and you want to either filter that out with maybe a
coffee filter,
or probably an old T-shirt. Some of these you can definitely, especially with the red cabbage, once you've mixed that up and once you've really blended or using the mortar and pestle, you've crushed that red pigment. You can use a cheesecloth, you can use a wad of paper towels, or you can even use an old T-shirt and kind of squeeze that out. What would you like?
Paper towels.
You want some paper towels? There you go. Now I've lidded this up. I've lidded this up, and I'm going to go ahead and shake that. Would you like to coat? Why don't we get some paper out and coat some of the red wine first while I get this set up for you?
So you just take your brush, dip it in your coating, and do a nice smooth coat.
Now that is really light. What can we do to make it better?
Well, we can let it dry and coat it again.
Okay.
Do multiple coats. That's the best thing I can think of. Or you can float it in it.
Okay.
You can drink it. I'm not sure that's going to help coat your paper.
So once it dries, we can coat it again and keep going until we get a nice base.
Correct.
Okay.
And some things are going to be darker than others.
Now what? If you don't want to brush it on, can you just kind of? I mean, I guess you waste a lot of the pigment, but can you just put it in a tray, some kind of a maybe a dish, and just put a bunch of papers in there together?
Correct. You can do that.
Excellent.
And it's always good to keep notes. So have a pencil and write down what you coated each thing in. And you might want to coat multiple things, and I'll show you later why you want multiple coats. Why you want to keep notes and why you want multiple papers of each one. It helps you later once you're exposing your anthotype.
But keep notes. Can you write on the back of these papers?
Yes.
Excellent. So write on the back what you did. Because you may have something that turned out really great, and next week, if you're anything like me, you've forgotten everything you've done. So you don't know what you coated it with, how many coats, you don't know how long you exposed it for, and it's gone forever. So write on the back that this is red wine, turmeric, red cabbage, and how many coats you've made. And once you're done exposing it, kind of say, hey, it was April, and we put everything out in the sunlight to bleach out a little bit, and it took 20 hours or something.
The disadvantage of this process is that it can take quite a while to get your exposure where you want it. So you need to be patient. Unlike the cyanotype, which is within minutes, this can take hours to days.
So maybe not something for the impatient, but it's something you can definitely coat one night, get ready in a contact frame, and then go to a park. Go to a park. Put these in put these in the windshield of your car, maybe, and then go on a hike. Or if you have a what would be? I guess it would be a south-facing window. If you're in I guess that's northern hemisphere. It's kind of weird. It's kind of weird talking to people that could possibly be around the world. But for us, it would be a south-facing window so that it always gets sunlight. put it in a south-facing window, and just check on it every once in a while. But it's definitely not an easy, it's definitely not a fast process for sure. Now this turmeric here is I don't think it's ready yet. Let this sit overnight, and you can either decant off the pigment, the clear pigment. It should be clear. It should be absolutely clear stuff, and you can either do that or.
This is some previously made that was made the same.
And she filtered that with just a regular coffee filter, right?
Yes.
Okay, great. So we're going to, let's say, we're going to put this away, and I'm going to pretend that that's where we are. So go ahead and can you coat a little bit of that for us?
You'd want to rinse your paintbrush before using another emulsion.
But you didn't. You didn't rinse your paintbrush, right?
I did not. I'm not at a sink right now.
Experiment. If you coat something with red wine, and then you coat something with the turmeric, and then you coat something with the red cabbage, you may eventually get to something that's kind of neutral in color. Okay. Clean up all of this. Put that off to the side. Now, once we've done this, what do we want to do?
Next thing we need is a contact frame.
Well,
we want to make sure this dries,
okay.
And you want it to be completely dry before you start, before you expose it to. And
that'll be bone dry, right? When you touch it, it shouldn't feel cool because of the evaporation. When you touch it, it's completely dry. Some of our processes we can actually cheat, and we can use a hair dryer to dry it. And kind of speed up that process, but this I wouldn't, because you don't know if that pigment is going to be attacked by heat. And make sure you dry it in kind of a dark room, or at least something that doesn't have access to UV light like sunlight, or potentially sunlight, fluorescent bulbs, anything like that. Okay, we've got everything created, we've got everything coated, we have our notes on the back. Everything's nice and dry. What is the next step?
Next, we want to put them in a contact frame. What that does is it holds what you're putting in front of this onto your emulsion.
Well, we need to talk about photograms first. And a photogram is kind of like a photograph. It's basically putting something over top of that. And if you can see here on this here, we will be making a photogram of this leaf structure here. Now, I have in my contact frame here, I've got an actual, it's not a negative, but it's kind of like a negative, but it's a positive negative. So it's a piece of film positive that thankfully the sun cooperated and did not peek out but maybe twice today. And this here has been exposing for 2 days, and I even had it in our UV exposure box in the dark room for about 20 hours, and hooray. Christine, I think, also had the red cabbage. You're going to notice that some things bleach out quicker, some things bleach out slower. Turmeric is really good. It almost seems like that works out really well. And we've also, I don't know if Christine mentioned this or not, but we also found that really cheap construction paper works well as well, just because the pigment that they use is not a very high quality pigment, so therefore the light fastness is kind of down.
Just to show you how little this has bleached, that's why I said you might want multiple coated papers. You can look and see how much it has faded. And this one's not very much at all compared to the other one that was coated at the same time.
We have a comment in chat by Connie. Connie asks, is this something that kids can do? Absolutely. As we kind of mentioned before, make sure if you just joined us, make sure you go back to the beginning of the live stream, and we're talking about how to make these not really chemical. We're basically pulling pigment out of plant leaves, plant flowers, berries, spices. We're using turmeric and a little bit of isopropyl alcohol to pull that pigment out. And this is definitely a kid-safe process. This is one of the, I believe that usually this is the first process that Christine teaches the kids because they need to coat everything and let it dry. So thank you for the question.
But at our workshops, we usually can't expose these because, again, it takes hours to days to get these exposed, depending on the sunlight.
In the middle of summer, if we're really lucky with the sunlight, we can start them kind of early, and by the time the workshop's over, it'll be kind of close. Now you showed we're talking about the contact frames here, and remember that we need to talk about keeping an extra coated piece of paper for later. But Christine was talking about these contact frames. Now, a traditional contact frame is the reason for that is it's got this nice spring hinge on the back, and its purpose is to push this. Oh, I see a little bit. No, it's definitely not going to show up. But what the contact frame does is it will push that kind of emulsion, the pigment coated piece of paper, together and with the glass, and in front of the glass you've got your object for your photogram, like Christine has here. Now, as I said, these aren't very well easy to find anymore. There are a few companies that will make these. You don't need this unless you find yourself doing a ton of these. But all it does is you're squishing that paper, you're squishing that leaf or object with a piece of glass to make sure that you keep that registration. And Christine has come up with a really interesting way. Christine, tell me about this. Well, how is this similar to our contact frame here?
So this is my homemade one that almost anyone can make, because these are things that you should have around your house anyway. This is a clipboard, so it helps hold a piece of glass down, and then I use binder clips at the bottom to hold the bottom on. And then if you look, the glass has tape around the edges, and I do that to help protect any sharp edges. And we use that to protect, because usually these are used for kids or even at our adult classes. These are a little easier to come to find and to get a hold of and to use. Something
we've noticed with the black tape around the glass as well, and not only, as Christine said, it keeps anybody from cutting themselves, especially if you're cutting this glass yourself. Typically, if you cut it yourself, the edges, the burrs are really sharp. It'll slice your hand up like nobody's business. But this tape not only protects anybody from cutting themselves, but if a kid drops this piece of glass, typically it won't create these nasty giant shards. It'll kind of keep everything together so that we can get it cleaned up and take care of that. But we always have, supervision for children, but depending on their age, we will either kind of tell them, okay, well, set it up yourselves, and then we'll put the packet together, or just kind of keep an eye on that. Now here's the thing. Obviously, if glass is so darn dangerous, why can't we just use something like maybe a clear acrylic?
Well, the reason we don't use acrylic is every acrylic we've found that is out there has a UV protection on it. So it prevents the UV light from getting through. And all of these processes that we're doing work because of UV light getting to the emulsion. So as long as this process already takes, it would take a lot longer to have it under something that...
So you're saying there's a chance?
There's a chance, but it's going to take a lot longer, and you're not going to like that, how much longer it takes.
Okay. Christine showed clipboard, piece of glass. This is an 8x10 piece of glass. You can go to any of your big box store, any of your home improvement stores. You may even have some frames around. That works great. If you've got some picture frames around, and you just not use any picture frames, or you just never put them up, you just make sure it's glass, and then kind of start building the packet in there, and probably using just binder clips. Binder clips would work good, rubber bands. Even if you've got a piece of glass and a book, it just needs to be a hard surface, piece of glass to sandwich everything together and try to keep it from moving around during the exposure. Right?
Yes.
Excellent. We have our contact frame done. What is the next process?
Next step is to put it out in the sunlight until you see it fade. And as you saw, this has been exposing for about 3 days with the cloudy and the rain and such, so it's not getting very far. And you see how this almost matches this exactly. So I know this hasn't been exposed near long enough. You can expose it till it's almost white around the outside, but that would take a lot longer. And here's an example of
Here's a cool thing to do as well. Don't just coat, obviously, you're going through all this, don't just coat one piece of paper, but not only because it's kind of, you want to do this a lot, you want to have a lot of fun, and as long as you keep these in the dark once you dry them, they'll last for, probably last forever, won't they?
Probably.
Maybe, I don't know. Don't take our word on it, but it's going to last a long, long time. But if you have another piece of paper that hasn't been exposed, you can have this in a contact frame, and then you can bring out this unexposed piece of paper, and you can kind of judge to see exactly how much you've bleached out. And another good thing is to also have a piece of, can I have that piece of paper? Also have a piece of paper that is not coated, so that you can get an idea of how long it's bleached and how much longer it has to go. And you can decide how far you want. You can bleach out just enough so that the leaves are completely unbleached, or we've made leaf Anthotype photograms to the point where you can actually see the veins in the leaf, because the UV light will eventually penetrate through that leaf, through the leafy material, and then leave the veins behind. Okay? Perfect. We've got all this. We're going to put this out in the sunlight. Obviously, we want to make sure that it's not going to get hit, knocked. It's not going to hurt anybody. If it's a rainy day or a cloudy day, just know that it's going to sit out there for a while. So make sure it's somewhere safe. And throughout the day, if you've got to turn this to point it towards the sun, go ahead and do that. Let's say we've just created this. I'm going to reach across you. Let's say we've just created our photogram. We are done. We like how much has bleached out, and we undo everything. And what's the next step?
Your Anthotype is done. You may want to scan it and put it, or take a picture of it, because over time, if this gets in sunlight again, where it's not bleached will bleach. So that makes this not quite as an archival process as several of the other processes we do. But there you go. That's your Anthotype. You're done.
Excellent. Now, you definitely want to scan this because, as Christine said, it will continue to fade and fade and fade and fade and fade. And that was one of the problems with the early start of photography, is we had silver nitrate that would darken in the presence of light, but we couldn't stop that process. And people would actually have viewing parties where they would look at these photograms they made with silver nitrate under candlelight, and eventually they would just fade into nothing. But definitely scan this. You can then go in and adjust your contrast, adjust your colors. You can combine them digitally and then make yourself a really nice print and go from there. Once we have this done, you can also, since you're using watercolor paper usually, you can also use this to paint around. Take a pen and make a design on it. The possibilities are really endless, where this is the start, or it could even be the end. You could have made a design or made a drawing on a piece of paper, and then the Anthotype is your last step, right?
Correct.
Excellent. I understand that there is a fancy way to work with turmeric, though. And before we go, let's talk about turmeric and how we can maybe darken that. I think you have a couple examples to show us, don't you? Just one. Turmeric, or the curcumin, actually has a kind of interesting property that's very similar to red cabbage, where it is similarly litmus as well. And if you expose it to very basic, you can darken the turmeric as well. So what you can do is you can make your Anthotype like normal. And once you have this one here, we can put this in a solution of baking powder, baking soda. Sorry, thank you, Christine. Baking soda. Actually, no, it isn't the other way around. It's acid. Acid goes what? Okay.
Baking soda.
Baking soda is a base. So baking soda will actually turn it a little bit darker, and you can see the difference right there.
How it's a little more rusty / orangey than the base. And you can do that afterwards if you want to, if it just didn't get dark enough for you. We did this after we exposed it. Excellent.
Well, Christine, that is fantastic. I'm keeping an eye on chat just to make sure we don't have any other questions coming through. If anybody has any questions, we will be happy to field them to just get started. And is there anything else? Now here, actually, before we stop doing this, I want to talk about the fact that Anthotypes, when you make these, they look like this. But when you make a cyanotype, it's the opposite. It's blue on the outside where the sun touched, and it's white where the sun didn't touch. Can we talk a little bit about that?
Correct. So this is the opposite, and that with the cyanotype, the two chemicals that you mix together then turn blue once exposed to the UV light. This bleaches around where you put the object over top of it. So you have a positive versus a negative.
What you're telling me is that the anthotype uses the bleaching power of the sun, where a chemical process like a cyanotype, silver nitrate, something other than that, instead of bleaching out, it just darkens.
Correct.
The chemical process just darkens
Or
for cyanotype or silver
modifies
nitrate.
the chemical somehow to make it cheap.
Well, we won't get into the science of it because that's really dry and boring. But this is the difference between a negative and a positive process. The cyanotype process is a negative process, and that is because where the sun hits, it darkens. Where the sun doesn't hit, it doesn't. And you'll remember this if you've ever shot film with a camera. You'll realize that every time that you came back with a roll of film, unless you were shooting slide film, that's a definite exception. But typically your black and white photos and your color photos came back negative. That's because silver nitrate is a negative process, and when you enlarge that onto a piece of paper that's also coated with silver nitrate, that is a negative process. Negative times a negative equals a
Positive.
and that's how we get that. So that is the difference between a negative and positive process. I'm keeping an eye just to make sure we don't have any questions. I don't think we do, and we've been broadcasting. We've been live for over an hour, so I think that's enough. This is not a difficult process. This is something you can do with your kids. This is something you can do as an adult, and we really hope you do that. You're going to be able to go out and walk around. Now, Christine, whenever we go walking, whenever we go on a hike, or whenever we go to a park, Christine brings this book along every single time. And it's a book that, it's not really a valuable book. It's actually pretty damaged up. We bought it for, I think, $0.25 or $1 at one of the antique stores. And tell me about this book, Christine.
I use this book. It's not a book that I'm interested in keeping. It's a book that is a little damaged, and
it's very dry rotted. The pages are kind of crinkly.
But I can put leaves inside of it and not worry about the leaves damaging the book. So I take this with us, and every time I find leaves that I like, that are good shaped or that I want to keep,
oh wow,
I put in the pages of this book and press them.
And that will only help you because fresh leaves, it's really difficult to get them to stand, to get them to kind of lay down when you're putting that contact frame package together. So just doing this, not only can you reuse this over and over and over again, but man, it's definitely a pancake. But that's a fantastic idea, and you don't need anything this big, or you can go bigger. And as you're walking through the woods, if you're taking a hike, and you find some nice leaves, oh, look at that one. That one's really good. That one's got some really nice veins in the middle. But find really nice leaves, flowers. Take a little baggie with you, and as you pick flowers and plant pigments, you can take them home and make Anthotype, the Anthotype pigment with them. But this is just a really good idea. Look at that. That's great. Excellent. Well, like I said, I asked for some more questions, and we didn't get any questions. But if you have any questions, if you're watching the live stream after the fact, I know we had a lot of people say, just to make sure that we were going to keep it up. We are going to keep this up. Again, we want to give back to the community and help everybody in the time of a little bit of need, and when people need to, try to get out a little bit more safely, go to a park, as long as it's okay to do so in your state, and pick up some pigments, pick up some leaves. Now, people can also use anything from around the house as long as it's flat, right?
Correct.
Excellent.
If you have lace that you like, or a little design that's kind of a cutout, or a template for something to draw around, any of those things, that type of thing would work.
Now, can somebody paint the... I know you. I probably know the answer to this because I know you do this with cyanotypes. Now, can somebody actually use this pigment material to paint? If they're so inclined, we can't paint, we can't draw stick figures, so that's why we sit behind the camera all the time. But can somebody use their artistic ability and paint nice scenes with different pigments and then expose them?
Correct.
Excellent. That sounds really good. Well, thank you everybody for joining us. If you have any questions after the stream, feel free to leave a comment on the video. Feel free to share. We know a lot of people with kids stuck at home. A lot of people that may not be able to go into work. Hopefully, this gives you a little bit of a creative outlet of something that you can go into your pantry and probably find everything that is necessary for this. And we really want you to share these with us as well. If you create yourself an Anthotype, we want you to share that with us, and we may do a follow-up video, and we'll share some of your guys' Anthotype creations. We'd like to see what you come up with, and go from there. And you can find us on the web. Our website is johnmilliker.com, JOHNMILLEKER.com. You're likely finding us on Facebook, and that's John Milliker Photography. We also opened up a Patreon. We've had a lot of events kind of cancel on us, and we figured we really want to continue with our mission of promoting the history of photography. And we're going to try to get a lot more online. We've already started working on our website so that we can share a lot of these things that we found with the world. But we have a Patreon at I think it's Patreon John Milliker, JOHNMILLEKER. I'll leave a link down on the bottom at some point. And if you like to toss a buck in the tip jar, I think we have a couple Patreon tiers of some stuff that we've created in the darkroom, and we continue to create every month. So if you have any questions, as I said, be sure to post them down at the bottom. Make sure to share with us your creations, and if you have any, I hope you do this. This is a really cool process. This is kind of a gateway process because after this, it's Anthotypes, which is it's 2 chemicals. The chemicals are safer. They're not any worse than anything you got in your house right now. But with kids, they definitely need to be supervised. And as Christine said, that's the negative process, and that's a beautiful process. That's blue. It can be toned to different colors, and from there, man, you're making pinhole cameras. You're using a lot of cool analog darkroom kind of chemical photographic processes. So, thanks for watching, and good night, everybody.